All right, everybody. I'm sure there'll be more filing in here as we get started, but in the interest of everybody's time, I'm going to go ahead and get going. Thank you for being here. This is the April edition of our DuPage ROSC presentation series. My name is Jarrett Burton. I am the coordinator for the DuPage ROSC. These presentation series meetings are separate from our council meetings. For those of you who are here for the first time, we kind of created this series as a monthly thing to take some more time to kind of dig into topics on the recovery continuum. Sometimes at the council meetings, there's so much information we got to cram into an hour that we don't have the time for presentations to kind of breathe in the way that we would like them to. So we always try to pick a topic that's timely, stuff that maybe people aren't always thinking about when it comes to substance use and mental health challenges, alternative treatments, you name it, we try to cover it. So with the preamble out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then at the end of the presentation, hopefully we'll have some time for some good discussion on the topic. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Can I get a thumbs up if folks can see that? I see the thumbs up from Mark. All right. So presentation for today, we're talking about vape shops. This is actually a presentation I did about a year and a half ago. And as I was telling a few people at the beginning of the meeting, only time in like the 3-year plus history of ROSC where a recording has been corrupted and then thus lost to time. So we wanted to run it back because there's been a lot of new information to update from the original presentation. And so we're going to be covering quite a few different substances. We'll give you kind of like a in-depth rundown on some of the main ones. And then there's a few that have popped up on our radar over the past year or so that we'll talk about at the end. And then hopefully we can introduce ourselves at the end and have a discussion. So let's get it going. So why are we talking about vape shops? I don't know about you, if in your area, if you're like mine, within about a 2 square mile radius, there's at least 4 or 5 vape shops, and I just live over here in Carroll Stream. I am constantly seeing new ones pop up. The official count in the US is not precise, but current estimates say there's about 35,000 vape shops in the US, and I'm guessing that there's a lot more because there's no real easy way to count those. There's 100 plus vape shops alone in DuPage County, probably getting closer to 200 at this point. Now, at these shops, while tobacco, vapes, and e-cigs make up the large chunk of sales at these shops, they stock a ton of, and you can see I have their legal in quotes, mostly unregulated substances. So we're talking about Kratoms, Delta-8, Tianeptine is a new horrifying one that's popped up that we'll get into, a little bit about nitrous oxide, and then at the end, a few more we'll talk about. Age of purchase can be murky, and we're going to go over that at the end. I do have a slide that kind of goes substance by substance in the state of Illinois. What is the age restriction? Very murky. Most, if not all, these substances we're going to talk about do have abuse potential, especially for those of us who have a history of substance use challenges. And as always, like I like to say in these presentations, these are for educational purposes. We're not out here to demonize users of these substances or people who maybe have switched to using these from quote unquote illicit substances or to push scare tactics. All we do in these presentations is just make folks aware of what's out there. Number one, Kratom. Look at our friend Kratom. So you can kind of see it's that brownish green powder. And we'll talk a little bit about how it's manufactured and processed. But you'll see it either in that powder form or in the capsule form, which is literally just like vegetable glycine capsules with the powder inside. What is kratom, though? Believe it or not, it's actually from the coffee family. So it's the Mitragenous speciosa. And by the way, heads up, there's a lot of these pronunciations that I'm going to try and hit in this presentation, and some of them may come off wonky. So just apologizing in advance. But it's from the coffee family. So the leaves and the extracts of the leaves are harvested for medicinal and recreational purposes. If you look over there to the right, you'll see the kratom plant and the leaves, which are harvested to do that. So this is native to the Southeast Asia area. primarily grown in Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia, which also happens to be traditionally known as that golden triangle of heroin production back in the 60s and 70s. It's going to follow that same area. Traditional use of kratom in Southeast Asia was first reported as far back as 1836, but it goes back further than that. That was just the first reported use of kratom in Asia. First use in the US, not really known. We started to see cases emerging in the early 2000s describing kratom as a treatment for opioid withdrawal symptoms. And a lot of the stuff that you could find online back in the day were out of forums and other places where opioid users who were trying to quit were finding these methods, and they were sharing these methods that they have used, and kratom was one of them. So that's when we first started to see it pop up back then. Primarily consumed orally, like we said, it's available as those capsules, as a powder, tablets, concentrated extracts. These are some of the ones that are a little bit more dangerous too. They come in like this little shot looking thing, and it's basically just concentrated kratom extract. So sometimes when you see people showing up to ERs for different reasons, it's because they've been taking those extracts pretty regularly. More than 2 million Americans have used kratom in the past year, and that was from 2024. It's probably going to be going up as we slowly start to see all of these things go up, but that's a not insignificant amount of people to have used kratom in the past year. The kratom industry in the US alone, $1 billion with a B. It is a huge industry, and it only seems to be growing over the years. As far as the use in Asia, workers out in the fields will actually just chew on the leaves as opposed to using it in any sort of other way. They use it as a way to kind of like relieve fatigue for manual labor, increase work efficiency. Like we said, it's from the coffee family, so it does have that kind of stimulant effect on people. The fresh and the dried leaves are also brewed into teas over there, which are used to treat kind of a wide range of things: diabetes, GI problems, fevers, even used as wound poultice. The kratom tea is also used primarily among men in certain areas over there, kind of as a religious function. Sometimes rite of passage and things like that are used with these teas. It's also used as a substitute for opium. So to reduce that withdrawal symptoms we talked about for opioids over here in the West, they do that over in Asia as well. Kratom was actually illegal in Thailand up till 2021. It was like the #1 manufacturer of it, but it was still technically illegal. The government cracked down on farmers that were growing their own trees, but it's very common for households over there to have like their own kratom trees in their backyards or in their gardens. Overseas, they have some very interesting ways of delivering kratom to people. There's a combination that they make with cough syrup, sometimes with codeine, Coca-Cola, other sodas. You might see that online as 4x100. Also, these potions. This is something that's like very popular on TikTok. Kratom extracts are combined almost with like uh, maybe something like a Kool-Aid, and then served at roadside shops, almost as like they call it potion. If you search kratom potions on TikTok, you could scroll for days with the amount of videos you could see. In the US, like we said, first use was probably back in the 2000s, at least documented. The FDA in 2017 began issuing a series of warnings about kratom. And like we said, regulation's kind of murky. A lot of it goes from state to state. As far as, bans, as you can see, that's banned in 7 states right now. Alabama, Arkansas, Indiana, Rhode Island, Wisconsin, and then there's a bunch of others that the legality is kind of looked at in a jurisdictional sense. So, maybe you say, hey, here in DuPage County, it's illegal, but you could go next door to Kane and get it. So that happens in a number of states as far as the regulations. Advocates for kratom, though, say that these bans are actually harmful. And we'll kind of see as we get into the next substance. In some of these states where kratom has been banned and the people who have been using it as that opioid withdrawal replacement medication, they say that banning is actually moving people on to some of these other substitutes that are way more dangerous. Tianeptine is a big one that we're going to talk about coming up. But the Tianeptine use in states like Alabama, which skyrocketed almost exactly right after they banned kratom. So you can kind of see how people are being pushed to other substances based on kind of blanket bans state to state. How does it actually work? So there's two major psychoactive ingredients or alkaloids, mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine. At low doses, the kratom, this is how interesting this substance is. So at low doses, right, kratom is going to produce more of like a stimulant effect, not like a massive Adderall type stimulant effect, but you'll find increased alertness. You'll have a bit more energy. Maybe you're a bit more talkative. At high doses, though, users will experience more sedative effects. So not unlike opiates. So when people are taking it in kind of those large amounts, they're usually seeking that kind of sedative effect that they might get from opioids. There's a wide range of different strains, so not unlike marijuana, marketed for their specific and unique effects on the user. So you might see red kratom marketed as a sedative and pain relief, or you might see green marketed as an energy, stimulation effect, white for euphoria. There's a number of different strains, and they're all marketed for kind of different reasons. Those alkaloids, the reason that people were kind of switching over to kratom when they were trying to get off opioids, because kratom has somewhat similar effects on the mu and delta opioid receptors in the brain. They're the ones that are involved in pain control, mood, and well-being. So kratom is going to bind to those dopamine D2 receptors as well. Those are the ones that have like a really crucial role in regulating dopamine in the body. The long and short of that is the risk of addiction, abuse, and dependence is there because of the way that it interacts with the brain. It's not going to be as severe as an opioid, but they are still affecting those same receptors in the brain. So that same abuse potential is there. Its effect on the body, let's talk about kind of like the adverse effects. People who are taking too much kratom are going to find nausea, vomiting, constipation. So you're going to see those GI issues. Dizziness. A lot of people online, if you kind of go and see on different forums and sites, people talking about taking too much kratom, they can get dizziness to the point of vertigo. That's how bad it can kind of dry mouth, sweating, and sedation, tachycardia. So we're talking about heart issues in doses over 8 grams. Liver damage can occur with that chronic long-term use. The withdrawal symptoms are not going to be too dissimilar from opioids. Like we said, it's not as strong as an opioid addiction, but it's going to affect those same parts of the brain and the body. And so you're going to get very similar effects when people cease using kratom after a long time use. The risk of dependence really seems to be highest for individuals who are consuming those higher doses. So as I said, long story short, abuse potential is there. When we're ceasing use, we're going to see the same effects as we've seen in opiates and some other substances. As far as treatment options, this is what's interesting. Kratom is one of those things that I'm not going to say it's newer, but people who are developing chronic kratom usage and showing up for some types of treatment is relatively newer. So different places, depending on the severity of the use, may look at a medication-assisted recovery option. So Suboxone is usually one that is offered for kratom dependence. They don't tend to go as strong as something with like methadone or something that's, uh, for people who've been using opiates chronically for a long period of time. It's not that strong, but Suboxone has been shown to be helpful for that. If we're doing like an inpatient detox, usually they put them on clonidine and some other dihydrocodone sometimes, even though that has its own risk of dependency. But we're going to try to get the blood pressure down, try to kind of battle those effects of those opiate withdrawals that are very, very similar. Another medication shown to be effective is gabapentin. If you're familiar with gabapentin, it's usually for treating seizures, nerve pain, and people with epilepsy, off-label for anxiety and depression sometimes, but that has shown to be useful in people who are quitting kratom. Treatment options and recovery pathways are going to be very similar to opioids. So this is, like we said, kratom is something that people who are showing up for treatment with kratom as like their primary is still relatively newer. So we're learning as we go with these substances. Let's talk about tianeptine. This is the one that's scary. I like said at the beginning, I don't do scare tactics, but I've done my research on this one, and this is one that we very, very dangerous and something that we should all be looking out for. Tianeptine is actually an atypical tricyclic antidepressant. Think about that. This is an antidepressant on par with SSRIs and other things. Outside of the US, it's sometimes used to treat major depressive disorder. It may be used to treat anxiety, asthma, and also some IBS and GI symptoms. Here, not FDA approved for anything medically, but you'll find it available online. Vape shops in the South, gas stations carry them. It's been linked to serious harm, ODs, and even some death, according to the FDA thus far. You might hear it referred to as gas station heroin. That's something that's a moniker that's stuck after that Kratom ban that I talked about in the earlier slides. The drug is approved for use in some parts of the world. Usually in Europe, you might see it marketed as Coaxil or Stablin. Those are not approved by the FDA at all in the US, so only overseas. Commonly sold here as a dietary supplement or a nootropic. If you're unfamiliar with a nootropic, it's usually something that's marketing like increase your brain power, or usually it's like brain related stackable supplements. Sold under the different brand names, you might see it as Zaza, Pegasus, Tiana, and I'm going to show some of those bottles as we go through it. Capsule form is usually the way you see it marketed and sold here, although you can find it in larger amounts as a powder or like a salt form, usually online. It is abused for its euphoric properties. It is very similar to opioids. So people are using this for those euphoric effects. We are seeing severe adverse health effects, though. Respiratory depression, severe sedation, and death have occurred from misuse. A lot of times it's polypharma. It's not just tianeptine in their systems, but it's something if they've been abusing other opioids, other CNS depressants, we do see severe sedation and death. How does it work? So some preclinical studies showed that like the tianeptine is going to bind and act as an agonist at those opioid receptors. So again, those are the receptors that are involved in pain control, mood, well-being. Tianeptine has a high potential for abuse because of the way it reacts as an agonist in the brain. It's also going to modulate the glutamate receptors. So these are the things that are kind of transporting dopamine, serotonin, and this can also kind of explain its antidepressant and anti-anxiety effects at the same time. Because of its effects, it does mimic the anti-anxiety and antidepressant medications. The withdrawal symptoms for this stuff, you guys, it can be very complicated and often worse for the user than even like your standard opiate or opioid withdrawal. And we'll talk about that here in another slide or two. All right, therapeutic uses of tianeptine. So like we said, this is largely overseas. Back in the 60s, the French kind of discovered this and patented it. Like we said, it was used as an approved antidepressant in 60 countries. Prescriptions in France, they limit them to 28 days to avoid tolerance buildup. So imagine that's what you're being prescribed, and you have that high of a abuse potential and tolerance buildup that you're regulated to 28 days only. Similar to a group of antidepressants called tricyclics, we've talked about those. That goes way back to the 50s. Tianeptine works a little bit different in the brain. One's thought to actually be a drug for our friend treatment-resistant depression. We talked about that a lot at recent ROSC meetings. We talked about kind of like those alternative treatments for people who just seem treatment resistant with their depression. So things like, Spravato or esketamine or TMS or, any of those new kind of treatment modalities we've talked about. This was originally thought to possibly be one of those. So this is the kind of how it was marketed and medicated overseas. Still kind of looked at in some circles as a possible alternative to benzos and SSRIs. But to be honest, the abuse potential is just insanely high for that. Look over there, Tiana Red. You may see it sold like that in little, baggies or bottles of capsules. Not approved by the US FDA for any medical use. Some companies, though, are illegally marketing and then selling us the tianeptine products, claiming that it can improve brain function, treat those anxiety, depression, chronic pain. If you were here for my nitrous oxide presentation a few months ago, if you know the history of substances and the way they kind of come to be and are sold and the markets created for them, there's a lot of these what we call snake oil salesmen. So when these substances come up, they say, "Oh, it can treat, XYZ," and they'll just, list off a number of things that this is supposed to treat. We kind of see that in some of these supplements. There's no one good thing that it's being marketed as, but like we said, that kind of nootropic brain function, some of these mental health challenges as well. Some have turned to it as an opioid alternative or to treat anxiety and or depression, usually in a self-medicating form because it's not being prescribed over here. Adverse effects though. Tianeptine, when taken at higher doses than suggested, and the tolerance builds up. And the tolerance actually builds up pretty quickly. Users who've been using it chronically report severe difficulty stopping and extremely severe physical and mental withdrawal symptoms. Um, I don't know if it's still on YouTube, but if you're interested in kind of seeing how tianeptine has affected people and addicts in different areas. Vice News did a video series going down there and interviewing tianeptine addicts, and it's a very, very harrowing video and article because when the woman who's being interviewed is talking about her time being a Tianeptine addict, she switched over from opioids or opiates, thinking this was, safer because it was sold, at gas stations and vape shops. Because that tolerance builds up really quickly, her and her partner, who was also using, got to a point where they were having to redose themselves about every 2 hours. And if they weren't, they were going into these insanely severe withdrawals. Because, like I said, it's more than just those opioid receptors who are getting control of things. It's also those antidepressant and those anti-anxiety effects that are hitting you at the same time that you're stopping use. So very, very dangerous stuff. Marketed as brands like Zaza Red, Tiana Red, widely available in shops and online. So those are just a few of the different ways that it's marketed to us as far as naming. Misuse and abuse, that earned that moniker gas station heroin due to its addiction potential. Down there in the South, like we said, Alabama, it's hit particularly hard. But southern states have reported numerous gas stations and vape shops being robbed at gunpoint for their supplies of tianeptine. Therapeutic dose range, and again, when we see therapeutic with tianeptine, I always want to do like the air quotes, therapeutic dose range, 20 to 50 milligrams a day. But chronic users are taking like 100 times that amount over the course of one day. Because the tolerance occurs rapidly, users are chasing that very short-lived euphoric effect of it and have to take larger and larger amounts. Bottles of 25 capsules, which you could see in that photo there, regularly retail, depending on where you're at, between $35 and $50, and users report needing multiple bottles a day to keep from going into severe withdrawal. So for those of us who have lived experience with coming off of opioids, this is kind of ringing a bell because it's putting us back in that headspace. But this is even worse than some of those opioid withdrawals that we went through. Its effects on the body, at low doses, that kind of adverse side effects, you may see headaches, dizziness, constipation, dry mouth, kind of some of those things we saw similar to Kratom. At higher doses, tianeptine can cause very serious health effects, which have caused death. It's going to shoot the blood pressure up, which is going to put you at risk of heart attack or stroke, liver and kidney damage over time, irregular heartbeat, difficulty breathing. We're going to see those same central nervous system depressant effects, even to the point of hallucinations after long time chronic use. Serious withdrawal symptoms, needing hospitalization, or extended care residential treatment have occurred in people who've stopped using tianeptine suddenly after regular use. Initial withdrawal symptoms, physically alone, just last about 7, sometimes longer, to 10 to 12 days for that prolonged use. So admission to detox unit is the bare minimum because of how bad the withdrawal symptoms are, but ultimately it can take months to fully recover from being addicted to this stuff. And God bless our ERs and our doctors and emergency rooms. They're still learning this stuff too. And you would see accounts from tianeptine users who would show up at detoxes and ERs and say, I'm here for this, and the ER not even knowing what the substance is. So word is getting out. We're trying to do as much education as we can. But this is one of those substances that really sprung up over the past couple of years, and some places just don't know how to treat it yet. As far as the treatment options, in the past substance, when I talked about Kratom and MAT or MAR as an option, but I said, you know what, methadone probably not needed for that. Methadone, usually needed for this. If you're looking at MAR on the Suboxone side, it's going to have to be a very high milligram per day. Methadone has proven more successful, and that's anecdotally. We don't have a ton of studies on this stuff yet, but methadone has proven to be a better option for it. Like I said, at least residential treatment. This is a very serious substance. Inpatient, intensive outpatient at the bare minimum, but really needs to be under observation for that, initial detox, taper, whatever it is to get off of this stuff. Needs to be medically supervised if possible. All right, let's talk about the deltas, guys. Delta is not as dangerous as tianeptine. A different type of way as far as like the marketing and other dangers that they show for some of the groups that are a little bit skew, a little bit younger. But this is something that I'm sure you've all seen pop up over the past few years and wondered, what is Delta 8? AKA Delta 8 tetrahydrocannabinol. It's a psychoactive substance found in the cannabis sativa plant, of which marijuana and hemp are two varieties. Delta H THC, or Delta 8 THC, is one of over 100 cannabinoids that is naturally produced by the cannabis plant. But this stuff is not actually found in significant amounts in it. Not evaluated or approved by the FDA for safe use. Delta 8 products may be labeled simply as a hemp product. This is sometimes a way they get around sales restrictions, but also may mislead customers who believe that hemp isn't psychoactive at all. So yes, these are hemp products, but that do have psychoactive properties. And before I kind of get into what it is, what it does, somebody asked me recently if things like Delta 8 are similar to things like K2 or Spice, and those items go back a long way. If you worked in this field for a while, or you just, were out there with lived experience, you know that K2 or Spice is almost like a synthetic marijuana. This is different. This is not a synthetic. This is actually from the plant. It does have those psychoactive intoxicating effects, kind of similar to Delta 9 THC, which is the component responsible for getting people high when using cannabis. We see a lot of edibles with Delta 8. There's obviously ways to vape and smoke it, but you see a ton of like gummies, chocolates, cookies. As you can see here, this bottle of gummies here, marketed similarly to things like Alka-Pops and other things where, you know, teens and adolescents might see that and it looks like candy to them, so it can't be, dangerous at all. Which is usually what we got to really keep an eye on when we're talking about prevention education with this stuff, is the way that it's marketed. How is it marketed to younger populations as well? There is vaping solutions, distillates. You may even see infused hemp flower. So they may sell it, which looks like, buds of marijuana. They're actually just infused with Delta 8. They don't have the Delta 9 intoxicating effects. Still psychoactive, but not as strong. Sometimes referred to as diet weed, and that's kind of what it is as far as the effects on the person. Similar to marijuana, at lower strength though. So you're still going to see some euphoric effects, relaxation, pain relief. Little research yet to prove how effective it is in treating mental health challenges. It has been known to exacerbate symptoms of anxiety, and I'm going to talk about that for a second. In my own experience, in my own life, marijuana was always a substance that I did not like and rarely did. And the reason why was because it made me incredibly paranoid, like every single time. Paranoia, anxiety, my body did not jive with that stuff. So for people who have similar reactions, this stuff can even, exacerbate those symptoms of anxiety in a way that traditional marijuana does. Negative side effects can include anxiety, confusion, dizziness, increased heart rate, vomiting, tremors, even psychosis in severe and rare cases. It's rarely going to exhibit something that strong. Not many studies yet. As we said, a lot of this stuff, we're still trying to get our bearings, but not a ton of studies yet to determine the effects of long-term use. limited research does show that it's probably going to have similarities to long-term use of marijuana. So over time, possibly some memory and attention issues, slower reaction processing time, lack of motivation, all those things that go along with long-term chronic marijuana use. One small study did find, though, that in the vape oil versions of some of these Delta 8 carts that get sold, um, things like lead and mercury show up. So sometimes with these vaping solutions, all kinds of dangerous adulterants and stuff that gets chucked in there, and people have no idea. So dangerous stuff in those smokable versions. Let's talk about Delta 8 and the youth. Researchers from the USC School of Medicine, along with University of Michigan and NIDA, did a survey recently with 2,000 randomly selected 12th graders across the US to talk about their Delta 8 usage. So of that 2,000 people, 12% of teens polled had used Delta 8 in the past year. So again, not a staggering amount, but that's a not insignificant amount of teens said who have used it. Rates of use were going to be higher in the South and Midwest, as well as other states who were lacking kind of like blanket Delta 8 regulations. In 2023, American Academy of Pediatrics did a study examining the marketing of Delta 8. So they were looking at online marketing mostly. 36% of the websites they checked did not ask for an age verification. 96% of the websites lacked a third-party verification for age or identity, and 98% offered edible versions of Delta 8. And then lastly, there a little bit more than half of the websites sold Delta 8 in packaging that would be considered attractive to teens. So we're talking about those things that look like candy, cookies, gummies, more than half the websites were selling that type of stuff. The FDA and FTC have had to send out cease and desist to Delta 8 manufacturers who have been mimicking those snack packages. So they are trying to take action as far as the marketing of the Delta 8. Nitrous oxide. So I did an entire hour-long presentation on this a few months back. So this is just a short version for those of you who weren't here. And if you are interested in going back and watching any of our presentations, they're on our YouTube channel, going back 3 years. So there's a ton of stuff you can go back and check out if you're interested. Nitrous oxide, we're really going to be talking about the consumer grade nitrous oxide, which you see there on the right. Colorless, sweet-smelling gas, most commonly used for sedation in surgical and dental procedures. Back in the day, if you wanted to do nitrous, you were probably going to a rave, or you knew somebody who knew a shady dentist who would sell, tanks of nitrous oxide. It was not something that was like readily available. It was a very niche thing. Nowadays, though, it is being sold consumer grade all over the place, aka laughing gas, whippets. Hippie crack is another one. The crack part of that is a direct reference to the short-acting nature of nitrous oxide. Used as an additive in whipped cream canisters. That's how you may see it a lot of times. Different, like the culinary, like Starbucks, like whipped cream gun looking things. Those are powered by little nitrous oxide crackers, they call them, that they screw on. You can buy those, by the way, at most any culinary store. They've had to start IDing people because kids were going in and buying boxes of those things. And as I always tell people when I talk about nitrous in these presentations, next time if you're a walker, so like I walk a lot, I'll go out to like the Prairie Path and Great Western Trail. Look down on the ground and you'll start to see tons of this stuff. You'll see those little whippet crackers all over the ground. You'll see empty nitrous canisters like you see on the right, Galaxy Gas and Eurogas, these other brands. They're everywhere now. I started to collect pictures of them because of how often I was seeing them. It's inhaled usually by releasing that nitrous gas cartridge into another container. Balloon's the most popular one. Some of these things like Galaxy Gas that are popular now do have the little dispenser at the top that you can get the gas directly out of. But because of the way that it affects, it can cause like frostbite on your fingers and mouth because of the way that it's stored in the cans, but also the way it's dispensed. It has, stuff that can cause frostbite in it. So loose regulations due to the culinary use being used in culinary settings. This stuff over here on the right, Galaxy Gas, and the other brands you may see in a vape shop, it'll still say on these canisters for culinary use only. And that has been kind of a workaround because pardon my language, you know damn well that it is not being used for culinary purposes. But much in the same way that head shops and which were the precursor to vape shops would sell, bongs and glass pieces, and they would say it's for tobacco use only. That's how we find workarounds for these things. Vape shops are carrying a varying range of this stuff. Like I said, it's usually labeled as for culinary use only. What does it do to the body? It's a dissociative. So it's going to cause user to feel that separation or detachment from body or physical environment. You'll talk to nitrous users who experience kind of like a tunneling effect, where the hearing kind of gets wobbly. You may get bass tones really heavily, and just kind of this blurred vision tunnel effect that happens after using. It's going to be felt immediately after inhalation, that euphoria, numbness, sedation, that tunneling I talked about. Very short-acting substance, tolerance builds quickly. So you'll see people chronically using this, much like other inhalants. If you've ever worked with a client who, has abused inhalants, it's a very chronic thing. They're just sitting there for hours at a time, abusing the inhalant, and that's what we see for users who are using this daily. The chronic use can cause memory loss, the kind of numbness and pins and needles in the extremities. B12 depletion, that's a huge one. This is not a substance that you traditionally can drug test for, unlike your usual, obviously 5 to even 12 panel. So when people are trying to find, substances in the body for nitrous, they look for a marker for B12 depletion. Psychological dependence as well, and even psychosis. So very, very similar to inhalants. That psychosis can really set in after long-term chronic usage. The other dangers of nitrous, we talked about it. It's going to get very cold, sometimes down to -40 Fahrenheit coming out of those cans. It can cause frostbite to the face area and fingers if inhaled directly from those. Long-term can also cause peripheral neuropathy, so that almost like permanent pins and needles, numbness feeling in the extremities, and that's from that nerve damage. Severely weakened immune system due to vitamin depletion. Increased risk of accidents and injuries from impaired coordination. There was a car accident, I want to say, about a month back that we saw on one of the police blotters where someone had been using nitrous while they were driving and basically fell out and crossed over into another lane. Thankfully, nobody was like severely injured, but we're starting to see that this is something that might, be causing that risk of accident injury from this stuff. The lack of oxygen, though, just from like we said, compulsive long-term use, which can cause obviously unconsciousness and death at certain points. So those are kind of the main ones. I'm going to talk about a couple more though that have popped up in this field, and maybe you can feel me on this one. Sometimes it feels like whack-a-mole with substances. Like one will come up, we learn about it, we learn treatment options for it, we advocate on some different level for ways that people can access treatment stuff for it, and then as we're doing that, another one pops up over here. And so that's a couple of these that we've seen lately. Not enough to warrant like an entire presentation on, but stuff that I think we should keep an eye on. So the first one, bear with me. I'm going to attempt to pronounce this, okay? 7-hydroxymitragynine, okay? AKA 7-O. 7-O is how you usually see it marketed. 7-O is a naturally occurring alkaloid that's usually found in smaller amounts in our old friend, the kratom plant. So it is a kind of a version of kratom. It's considered one of the more potent active compounds. It has a much higher affinity for the opioid receptors than just regular kratom. It's going to act as a partial agonist, which means it's going to be very strong on those receptors, at the mu opioid receptors. Limited studies has shown it to be even more potent at morphine at certain points, which is crazy strong. In my research for these presentations, if for the nitrous one, I went to a few different vape shops to ask questions about, who's buying this, how often are they buying it. Not a ton of places are carrying 7-O yet, but there was at least 3 that I went into that was selling it. So these are usually in like tablet form. So you'll see them in like little punch cards almost, like medication punch cards. So they might sell them in like packs of 5 or 10. And this stuff is significantly stronger. And one proprietor that I talked to said that he has more than one customer who comes daily for them, sometimes more than once in a day. So very, very strong abuse potential for that one. Definitely want to keep an eye on. The other one, though, is what we've called almost magic mushrooms. So these aren't the full-on traditional magic mushroom, but these are gummies, chocolates, and other edibles that are containing muscimol, which is a legal psychoactive compound from the Amanita muscaria mushroom. There have been some instances where these items were found to contain other unlisted ingredients, including psilocin, which is found in psychedelic mushrooms. So this is like a very close relative to the traditional magic mushroom, and you can get it at your local vape shop. Like we said, not a ton of regulation on these, as we'll find in the next slide. But again, edibles. When the shop I talked to who was selling this stuff, it looks indistinguishable from a candy package or a chocolate bar package. That's the way it's being sold, which is obvious, like we said, and when doing prevention education, those of us who do that, like the kind of hair on the back of our neck stands up. But like we said, it's very, very close relative to magic mushrooms. I'm actually a proponent, and we as an organization value multiple pathways to recovery. Bruce Seawick from COD has been such a great friend who's like been a huge proponent of psychedelics for use in treating therapeutic mental health and substance use challenges. I don't know if this is that though. This is kind of being marketed as recreational, at least the mostly that I've seen. Although I'm sure it's also being said to treat anxiety and whatever else, anything under the sun that we see the other ones say they're going to treat. So those are the two that are kind of popping up. There's some others, like there was one that I saw that was almost like they were trying to mimic Adderall, and I asked to look at it, and it was like mostly caffeine. So some of those aren't going to be as dangerous as these really psychoactive ones, but these are two of the ones that have come up that we've kind of keep an eye on as we do this work. Let's talk about ages. How old do I have to be in the state of Illinois to buy? Kratom, 18 years plus. And sometimes, depending on which shop you go to, you may or may not be asked for your ID for anything. Delta 8, 21 plus. With the deltas, because it's obviously related to the cannabis plant, anything related to cannabis is going to be 21 plus. Tianeptine, currently no statewide age restriction. The state cannot get a grip on what this stuff is. Age could vary by shop or by city. There is a proposed bill to ban it outright in the state of Illinois without a prescription. I don't know where that proposal is currently languishing, but it's at least been proposed. As far as nitrous oxide, also no statewide age restriction, so it could also vary. As we said, some jurisdictions, have laws for some of these things that may differ from, the city or the township right next to it. A lot of it varies. Point being, there's a lot of substances that you can buy, and there's a lot of murky age restrictions, which, like I said, it makes it problematic when working with teens and adolescents because of what they're able to kind of be marketed as and what they're able to buy. So yeah, kind of murky. So that is the updated vape shop presentation. I would love to hear any feedback from y'all, like we said, who've been kind of working in the field, stuff that we've seen, in the work with your clients. Is there any of these substances that have come up? I would love to have that conversation for the next few minutes, if you guys are willing. So if you want to jump in, you can just put your little digital hand up, or you can request the mic, and we'll get you up here. So yeah, I'll open it up for y'all now.
Thanks,
Not,
Jarrett. Hey guys,
hey,
Mark. Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Can't skip silence. No, you did a great job, Jarrett. Thank you for all that information. And I do see some great questions in the chat here too.
yeah, let me pop that open after this.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, just again, a little bit of the reminder again about naloxone, that it does work again in a similar way to any of those opiates that are restricting, breathing. They don't seem to be as effective, but still important nevertheless. So of course, there's my pitch. Shout out to Kane County Health Department. It's good to see you, Nathan. And everybody else, especially Serenity House. And I think the idea, again, these kind of, it seems like it's hard to keep up. Um, I don't remember it being this way. I sound like the old man back in my day. We kept it pretty simple. Whether not to mention, the World Wide Web and the access to, not only legal but illegal products, and there being no checks and balances in, enforcement. And so I can call something something that don't mean that's something. And just lived experience. We know whippets, right? That shows my age, right, Donna? You know, it's these are not new. They're just being packaged in a completely new format. The idea of, again, TikTok and social media kind of going viral for promoting these loopholes and these ways to find new ways to experiment and to utilize things like the nitrous oxide. And I, again, coming from a rave culture, it was, again, old school, where you had to find that dirty dentist to get you a big tank that cost a lot of money.
Yep.
Go up to a party and you'd hear that sound of a tank the whole party. But again, I lost three friends in '98 in Big Bear, California, driving up the mountain. And enjoying themselves on the way up the mountain and going right off a cliff, probably 1,000-foot drop. And again, that idea of obviously driving under the influence of anything is dangerous. But if you've ever had lived experience with any sort of inhalant like that, that is about as fast as can be. And it is zero control. You are absolutely out of it. And what can happen in those 5 to 50 seconds really is a big deal. And then the last thing, I think the great reminder too, how we're seeing this prominently, the inhalants also used with stimulants in LGBTQ plus community, referred to as chemsex. I'm seeing this everywhere, predominantly, right? And so this idea of, again, via dating apps, and there's all these new ways to connect, which is really good news for recovery. It's also making the battle that much harder because it also is giving access and shared, sort of tips and pointers on how to experiment. So thank you, Jarrett. Amazing job, man.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, you brought back memories talking about the raves. Like that was it. Like you either bought them from a culinary store, which we didn't know that we had access to, or you had to know a shady dentist. And nowadays you can just walk to the vape shop. So brave new world, scary new world sometimes. But a couple questions in the chat. Summers was asking about the study about Delta 8. I don't know the answer, Marissa, offhand. I may have to go back and look to see if they were aware it was Delta 8, but I think that from what, if I recall correctly, they were pretty specific about identifying Delta 8. And I don't know about asking them if they knew what it was at the time they were smoking, but I can go back and take a look. Um, yeah, almost magic mushrooms at gas stations. So you can kind of see it's not just vape shops. Like, this stuff can get sold, down at the local gas station. Um, any other questions or comments? Anybody want to jump in? I see Michelle. Good to see you.
I had a quick question too, back on the nitrous. Just wondering if people are still using like computer duster. That was what, in my lived experience with a loved one, that's what he always used because he couldn't drive his car if like that. But I didn't know if that was the same thing as this stuff now.
So it's different. It's similar in that, like we said, it's an inhalant, it's a short acting high, and it causes that kind of cyclical chronic use. It's gonna have slightly different effects. The air duster, we would see that probably a couple of clients per year, probably more that we maybe didn't know about. But the level of psychosis they got to from like the chronic use is very scary. And the scary thing too for those of us who work like in maybe like residential care or something like that, this is not stuff that you can like test for easily. Kratom is more available testing wise now, but that's only over the past few years. Still very expensive too. I think like Kratom tests are like 75 bucks a pop or something. But things like Tianeptine aren't showing up in unspecified UAs. You have to send it out and ask for it. Obviously, nitrous oxide, as I said earlier, the markers are usually in the blood. It's usually like vitamin depletion. It's not something that's going to show up on a UA. All of that is basically just to say those people who are in recovery from illicit substances can very easily slide onto this other stuff. Either as a substitute, either as a self-medicating thing, replacing the other. They may not be as dangerous as some of the illicit stuff, obviously the fentanyls and other things, but just every bit is habit forming. And that's really the point of these presentations, to say, I mean, you could walk down the street and buy any of this stuff if you want, which is very tricky for those of us working in the field. Anyone else? I do see a hand. Hi, Nathan.
Hi. I am just wondering, is there a specific age that you're seeing these substances being used in? Are they tend to be younger because of the lack of restrictions on purchasing them, or is it more older just with access to like TikTok and social media and everything? Is there like a specific kind of age group that we should be targeting or something like that? But
So others may have anecdotal experience with this as well. I can tell you what I've seen over the past few years, and the hundreds of different clients who've come through, is Kratom doesn't seem to be age specific. I've seen younger people all the way up to people in their 50s using that. So Kratom doesn't seem to be age specific like that. Tianeptine, we don't know enough yet. Limited anecdotal stuff. That is not a young person substance. Tends to be a little bit older. The nitrous, that is the young person stuff right now, because of the way it's marketed online. If you're familiar kind of like with the rise of nitrous over the past year, it started on social media in the South, in different like communities, like rap group, like rappers and things in the South. And then that trickled its way up here. And so it really took off on social media. If you go on TikTok and search Galaxy Gas, you could scroll for days, and it's people doing reviews of it. It's people like flexing out with it. Like it's all over the place. So that seems to be the young person stuff. I will say, in my previous nitrous presentation, I went out to a few different vape shops to ask them about like what are they seeing with sales on it. That's kind of where I'm getting this from. They told is mostly young people. However, there were some people in that kind of 30s to 40s age group who were like the hardcore chronic users. So they had a guy who's like, yeah, I got one guy that comes in here like 3 or 4 times a day, and he's buying these like Galaxy Gas tanks, that are supposed to what ostensibly last you a long amount of time, buying multiple of these a day. So originally it started with the younger people, but like I said, anecdotally, we're seeing chronic use even in like 25 to 40. But yeah, that's where I say, and say with Delta 8, that also is a little bit younger. I wouldn't say like teens, but probably like, 20 to 30, is usually what we've seen with that. Now, other people here who obviously work in this may have different reports annually for what they've seen. But that's kind of what I've seen over here in DuPage.
Yeah, it's Jarrett. Those Galaxy Gas tanks are expensive, man. So it
Yeah.
makes sense that you're gonna have a 30 or a 40-year-old probably with that kind of disposable income to purchase something like that. And I think that that's what was kind of scary. Was obviously this was during COVID and during a lot of our introductions to the TikTok medium of social media, and again being flooded with an algorithm based on maybe looking at a story. I mean, I was blown away at how many things I was seeing based on things I really wasn't asking to be introduced to, based on something else I had looked at. And it was that culinary influx. It was that we get creative with cooking, because again, 10 years ago, no one was using, nitrous to make the stuff fluffy or whatever the creative chef thing that came along. But again, that Galaxy Gas and a few other companies really saw that opportunity to show a new way to present, just like the old school days of water pipe, which we all knew was not water pipe and it was not being used for tobacco. But just that idea of, yeah. So I think that that's probably why the age limit or level is changed, or demographic is just based on costs a lot of money to keep a habit going like that.
Great point. Absolutely. Look, I will say one more thing. And I may have sounded like I was being kind of a doomer like around Tianeptine. The reason I'm doing that is because of like what I've seen with people who've been using that or have reported using it. Do some research on that. Truly, like go track down that Vice video if you can. I can maybe even follow up with you guys and send it. Watch interviews with people who are chronic Tianeptine users. It sounds like hell on earth, like truly. And this is something that they're buying in these little bottles, that are being marketed as like increase your brain power. The murky regulations. My colleague Blake calls these gray market items because it's not black market and it's not completely legal. And these margins we have to work in sometimes. So that's why I call it substance whack-a-mole. It's just trying to get one down and then move to the next one, and we do what we can, right? Any other questions or comments about anything today? If you just want to say hi.
I do have one more question, sorry.
Yeah.
Um, in your research or anyone's research, with these kind of up and coming drugs like Tianeptine and Delta 8 that don't have a ton of research behind them, have you seen effective methods in kind of limiting access to them? At what level is that effective? Is it at the state level? Is it at the county level? Have you seen specific strategies that work better in like limiting Tianeptine selling or yeah?
Well, Tianeptine's nobody knows what to do with that yet. So there isn't one kind of established prevention method for that one. As far as like the murkiness of sales, what I say is this, like usually you'll see sales restrictions when somebody dies, or multiple people die, which is obviously very unfortunate. My take on regulation is that regulation shouldn't be an easy fix for lack of prevention and education. As far as like we said, because there isn't like a blanket, you have to be 18 for Kratom, Illinois. Like I said, Delta 8 is 21 because it is cannabis related. And in the state of Illinois, you have to be 21 for anything cannabis related. I don't know how often that gets enforced in vape shops, honestly. That's the other tricky part, which is these are independently owned places. I call them the mattress store of our era. If you know that reference, for a while, a few years ago, there was mattress stores on every block, and you're like, why are there this many mattress stores? So that's the vape shop is that now. I think a lot of them are, oh my God, it's like a gold rush. Let's open a vape shop. Some of them could be money laundering, who knows? But they're everywhere, and they make it tricky to be able to track age restrictions on stuff because half the time, you know how it is, they don't card people for this stuff. All right, well, going once, going twice. I appreciate you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the questions. Great discussion at the end. I think if anything we said we could take away from this is that conversation we had at the end of like, what do we do? Because there's these different substances, different regulations, all we can do is just try to stay educated on it, and that we come across clientele or residents or whoever that are dealing with these substances, we'll at least kind of know where to direct them, which is the goal of all this. So we appreciate it. Appreciate y'all coming. I'll put this recording up on our YouTube page so you can share it. The other thing, I'm always looking for presenters for this presentation series thing. If you have a topic that you're passionate about, that you would like to come and speak on for 45 minutes to an hour, we'd love to have you. The other thing, we're going to start doing our ROSC Council meetings at some rotating partner sites throughout DuPage and probably Kane. Well, absolutely Kane, because I know Mark Matthews and I have talked about some stuff. If your organization would like to host a DuPage ROSC Council meeting, we would love it. We could come and make an event out of it. shoot me an email. We would love to come out and do that. So other than that, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming back month after month. We appreciate it. And we'll see you at the next one.